test conference this year. And, you know, testing, using automation tools as pay-as-you-use also is a very attractive model for people to use. Equally, geo-based performance testing. I'm doing a performance testing project at the moment, which is why a couple of my slides are talking about performance testing. And I always kind of think, you know, you get your copy of your environment and it's 100% of production, or it's supposed to be, but you're only testing it locally. You're testing it on the local internal network. And your end users, they could be all over the globe. You might have users in France, Asia, so on and so forth. So why aren't you using your test load agents to actually realistically do performance testing from actual locations where your clients are or your customers are, or even having a test agent on the customer's machine, so it's the exact same user end experience that they would get. So these are all new technology stacks that we can start taking advantage of, and what cloud makes it available. One of the projects which I was working on prior to this, which I know there's a couple of the guys here from, was a testing as a service portal. And this was a Silverlight kind of HTML5 based interface, which you could use in theory on any device. Obviously this one's taken on a tablet, but mainly it used to run on a Windows platform. And you were able to kind of request the testing that you wanted to do, select the particular type of environment and the client and the language which you wanted to test, click the start button, and it would go and build some VMs up in the cloud, deploy the test agents, deploy the build. Then once it had finished doing the testing and it had sent the results back, it closed down those those VMs, and then give you the results on a similar kind of dashboard. And that enables people to do test automation or testing from any device, anywhere. And this kind of brings us on to this social enterprise. And Salesforce.com are really big on this, about being able to connect all your users to actually contribute towards testing, not just limit it to a particular testing department. And the web really does this, the ability to access it from anywhere, on any platform. So if you've got your iPhone 5 or equivalent, you know, you can access these great tools, these best-of-breed tools, anyway. You can access them now and kick off automation scripts, or check what your project's doing in your defect management. Things are changing so rapidly, we should take advantage of it, but we've got to use these tools in the right kind of way. I think that's the difficult challenge moving forwards. So, best-of-breed tools on demand is something that the cloud's offering. Sorry about this slide. But really what this means is businesses are able to focus back on being business, and they don't have to worry about being testing competency centers. Let people who are testing competency centers actually work and provide that service instead of a business, and this could be any business in the UK, it could be Tesco's, it could be Sainsbury's, wherever it is. Why do they have to be the best at testing? Why aren't they just the best at selling food? It always confuses me. So who should do the testing? Should you internally do penetration testing or security testing? Do you have staff on board who are skilled in that particular area? If you are, you're very lucky, but they're not always utilised 100%. The same as the performance testers. There's certain parts within a sprint where you may want to utilise certain ones of these skills, but they are very specialist. So I think this is where the testing as a service model really helps. I noticed earlier on, I kind of said, oh, to the performance testing guys, well, are you going to offer this as a service? And that's the way I kind of see it in the future, is it becomes a plugin which you just plug into your testing cycle. Say, oh, I want a bit of performance testing, I want a bit of security testing, how much do you want? And then you get it delivered. Instead of saying, okay, I need to send somebody to learn legal hacking and then let him know all my security testing phases, you really want to start thinking about who's the best person to do this testing for you. And so I've got this really weird idea of how the future may look from an ALM kind of point of view, the application life cycle management. Obviously this word's been thrown around a lot like cloud this year, so I'm not going to focus too much on that. But what I'm going to focus on is that businesses have problems, and usually they have an idea of how they're going to solve that problem, and some benefits and costs, how long they need to do to get this particular component up and running. And what they should do is, instead of throwing those ideas off to analysts and VAs and so on and so forth to go and pass it on to developers and so on and so forth and deal with it internally. Maybe this should have somebody who's going to advise them, and advise them like a cloud relationship manager who says, okay, independently, I'm not just going to recommend the top 3 testing service providers. I'm actually going to see who's best of class to do this particular project or this particular problem. And then I'm going to pick various service providers to do certain tasks. And we're obviously focusing on the testing component, but we still have to be able to communicate backwards and forwards with the other domain areas. So we've got a lot of tools, and we've got obviously the ISO coming out, which is going to be a big thing but we've also got TMMI and the ISTQB. We've got ways of communicating internally, but we've also got ways of communicating to the deployment team or the development team. And we've got tools, and these are various different tools which enable us to do testing. And we've got some great ideas of how we can use those tools. But let's just look at it from a model point of view, which is what I really want to talk about on this slide. So you can have one service provider dealing with the test domain management. So this could be the program test management component, working out what the high-level plan looks like, when they're going to be doing the defect management and reporting, when all the other components need to kick in. They can deal with all that kind of stuff. And you can then bring in additional service providers doing additional sprints in parallel who are providing compliance testing, penetration testing, performance testing, other services, all running in parallel within the same sprint. So this is a scalability kind of thing. Instead of having one service provider to do everything, or internally having to do everything, we split the work and we let people who are specialised in these areas really help drive the overall quality. And this, to me, is a kind of a solution lifecycle management. It deals with the solution to the problem. So that goes back to my previous slide. So how can we start improving on this communication and give this ability to start working on processes that are scalable and are kind of cloud ready? And one of the things I've been doing with some of my recent clients is looking at this powerful BPMN tooling, where you can actually start taking current business assets and converting them into test assets using these kind of techniques. And this allows you earlier on, before the actual software has been actually developed, to actually map out routes through the systems, scenarios, all sorts of different other boundary analysis, all your bits and bobs of the puzzle. And you only have to define those one piece of the puzzle as a test once, and then everybody else can use them, a piece of the overall puzzle. Equally, when you come to execute this stuff, you should only have to execute that piece of the puzzle once, and then everyone else should be able to reutilize that from automation. So we're talking about making things reusable. We're talking about us being able to assess the business risk and the impact of a particular component being broken. And this is really simple. This is just converting from Visio straight into BPM. And then BPM, you can put a number of different tools like ALM, and you're able to start doing this stuff very quickly. And this gives you so much power because you can start mapping really complicated scenarios from day one. This isn't a really complicated scenario, but it's 5 pieces of the puzzle. And there's actually over 25 different routes through these 5 components. And being able to map those routes straight away without even the software being built is quite powerful, and even from an automation point of view. So I've got this kind of concept which I know Mark was talking about the book, and I did a chapter on first day automation testing, which was a very similar kind of concept. And this is where I really thought about, we can do a similar kind of thing for manual testing and automated testing. So it shares a lot of the same principles. But I think sometimes we forget the complexity, and we forget that actually going between that particular flow where I'm logging in, I'm requesting a VM, I'm managing a VM, I'm accessing that VM, and then I'm logging out, that maps against a particular instance. And I know we've been talking about environments and the complexity around environments. I've kind of broken it down, and I actually think environment should be somewhere in here, so we'll change it. But it goes to an overall solution, but a solution under test could have multiple components, could have multiple applications that deliver as an overall solution. And there could be multiple builds and multiple releases of those separate components, and you could be delivering them to a number of different clients, each one of those clients requiring a slightly different widget or a slightly different business logic flow, different work streams, so there might be limitations on what marketing can access through those workflows, as far as finance might have access to more further information or logic which is slightly different. There could also be thrown in the idea of the location. Legislation might say that some data protection in the UK has got to be slightly different to Asia. There might be some compliance components. There could be some simple things like language. And all those components map just to one route through the system. And as these builds change, you shouldn't have to update your scripts and then them be out of date for the previous build. They should be dynamic enough to be able to support that model and be flexible to be multiple client, multiple version, multiple language, using this one set of business process components. So when I talk about a business process component, I'm talking about some of the techniques what we've started using for automation, things like DSLs. Well, I kind of break these idea of DSLs to be kind of business level keywords, so stuff that we know within the business. So order, quarter, and report might mean one thing in one company, but might mean something completely different in a different company. Whereas testing level keywords, where we're applying techniques or logic, everyone can understand. So mixing those together gives you the ability to write test assets that are self-validating against the source. So the ALM tool repository is the idea where you can start feeding in some of this logic. You feed in the business workflows, the testing rules, the business data, the testing data, and it validates that what you're writing as a test script is correct. It's correct against a particular model at a particular moment in time, against a certain version for a certain client, and it makes it so we can take some of the errors or human error out of it. And they should be readable. They should be readable to absolutely everyone, whilst being self-validating. So verbs and nouns should come together. So we know enter username list is invalid. The system knows it's invalid because it's not going to be a list box. It has an understanding of what the application is. Equally, if you wanted to run an automated test or another test asset manually, you should be able to go back and run this script manually in any different language. So if you say, I want to run this in French, then it changes what the objects are called because it understands that it's not going to be called username for this particular client in this particular language. So verbs and nouns in the DSL so that it's using content-sensitive validation. So that's quite powerful from a business component, a test component point of view. So I'm going to skip through this very quickly because it wasn't on my original slides, but I just felt it reinforced things. I'd like you, if you get a bit of time, to look through it and understand where I'm coming from, because it's just an end-to-end example. So this ATDD statement where the business is coming up to Dilbert in this case and saying, as a credit manager, I need to report daily on credit scores within 5 minutes so I can present them to senior management. How many times has this happened where Dilbert comes back and says, well, this script maxed out at 322 seconds at 98 virtual users? It doesn't really answer the question. It doesn't answer the business level question. And being able to trace the business level question all the way through to the actual test that was run is actually really useful, and it's really powerful to be able to have that. But you should be able, it's something that should be able to happen easily. Scary diagram, but the idea is, non-functional requirements are the basis of what we're doing for performance testing. But they should link to everything. They should link to the business process model. So you should say, at this component for this client, at this version, these non-functional requirements say this report must be coming back within 4 minutes. And you should be able to map the coverage against the actual test scripts or for a particular scenario of performance testing that covers that particular requirement off. So you should be able to trace that down and you should be able to trace that back up. Equally, within the business, they should be really focused in making sure that the business stories are correct, the business process models are accurate, the design documents which they've got internally are correct, whereas the project might be more interested in the risk dashboard, they might be interested in making sure the NFRs are correct, and from a testing point of view, we've got our storyboards, we've got our actual testing, we've got the dynamic test adapters which are interchangeable, so they could be load, they could be functional, they could be security, whatever we're trying to test the platform, still the same concepts apply. And so I kind of move in, I'm not going to go show that slide, it's just too scary, but it just shows that you can map all the way through with data to give us an answer. So when we come back, Dilbert can re-look at what he was doing and look at the particular transaction he was doing, right down to the interface, which is requesting through the business process model, through the different scenarios that it's going through for this particular version. He's able to say, okay, at that interface point, I can see that I'm clicking the order credit score report and it's coming back within a certain amount of time. He can look at the graphs, he can look at the value which he's done, and he can come back and say, actually the average is 240 seconds, which is well under 5 minutes. So when he comes back, he can actually say something more useful. He can say, actually, the worst possible scenario is if every single credit manager in the company requested the credit score at the same time, at quarter end, they'd still be under 5 minutes. And straight away, his manager's going to go, actually, I understand what you're trying to say there, and I can see how you've traced that back through to the question that I've asked. And at different levels, different people can understand it. So sorry about that, that was just thrown in just so you can logically walk through it, and I'm happy to talk offline a little bit more about that if need be. But let's get back to the cloud. So where are the testers in the cloud? And this one, again, is a really kind of hypothetical, future-based concept where, we've got 3 logical times, and this is internet traffic based on 3 of the main global time zones. So America, Europe, Australasia seem to be quite 3 logical areas where you could split up 8 hour, 8 hour, 8 hour, and have testing happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So how do we do this? Well, we talked about that solution under test, solution lifecycle methodology, where it sits across the top and it deals with development houses, people who are providing the different services. And what you have is this beautiful NASA kind of idea where you have a solution command center. And I thought this was a bit futuristic and far-fetched, but when I was at the Salesforce pitch, they actually had social enterprise command centers, which are just looking at Twitter feeds and looking at what's happening on who's tagging who in what photo and pulling all this data onto screens. Why can't we have a similar kind of thing where at a high level we can report what's happening to the business as it's happening? Okay, in the testing kind of component, we're looking at the environment statuses, the defects, blockers, managing the test assets, who's doing what when, kind of being able to manage that overall there. And then the testers can start working wherever they are, internal testers, cloud testers, alpha stakeholder testers who are inside or outside of the company. You've got beta testers like the BBC lovely website that just went from beta to live. There's all these users across the globe. And there's even the social networks where you could actually start giving people, opening up your product to 100 years, 100 man years of time is spent every day on Facebook. If you could tap into a small amount of that, just think of the testing possibilities. So, a bit far-fetched, but that's the idea of cloud. It's global now, and it's social enterprise ready. So, my second controversial statement for the night is, let's ban email. There was a company, what was the company, Stefan?
I think it's Atos.
Atos.
Yeah.
We've just banned internal email because 80% of it isn't used. And out of that, I've got this same kind of concept. Each time I look at an email, it's usually out of date. I go and check the status, and it's usually something's changed by the time I get round to to checking my emails. So it's static information at a moment in time. Let's start thinking about having living information. Start using activity feeds, and so information is continuously up to date. Don't just email every single person in the entire department a defect, what's just come up. It seems really scary. And the ISO standard, what we were talking about, it's great being in this kind of Word format, but why can't we have it in a more living format, something like a brain map? So where you can actually go down, you can drill down, and you look at static analysis testing, boundary analysis testing, or whatever it is, and start looking at examples and information, and it's a living, breathing entity where as soon as something gets updated, it's in there. I feel that maybe we're not using documentation for what it to add real value. It's a moment in time, and once that moment in time, once that document's been issued, it's gone, and it's a static piece of documentation. And start using dashboards to give you the right people, the right information. Like I showed you with those 3 different swim lines from the business and the project. Let's start having dashboards on nice plasma screens saying what the status of testing is, what is the state of the project, what is the status from a business point of view. Funnel virtualization, being able to drill down and get information that you want to see, that is critical to you, and display it in a nice, easy format. Not for the sake of it, because it actually adds value in what you're doing. Telling you where those blockers on the BPM are, so you know that you can't run those tests. Activity streams, you know, have circles of people of interest. So, you know, you find a defect, bam, it's in the activity stream. People know that you found it. There's not a duplicate one detected 30 seconds later. There's people who've got common interests. Oh, I've got a problem with this automation script. Anyone got any ideas? That's not just sent to everybody in the business. It's sent to a circle of people who are got interest in that, and they help each other out. Let's start working as a community. Let's, you know, start taking advantage of joint collaboration, but with tools that actually support joint collaboration. So, I think we need to move away from teams and how we are viewed within a scrum or a step. It's kind of, this is a bit of a classic, how project managers see testers, how designers see project managers. You know, straight away they've got this view. And I obviously know, with Agile, we're moving away from that. We're moving on to kind of cross-functional teams, which is great. But equally, cross-functional teams has challenges. So, kind of, testers are testers, and not programmers. But, you know, there's nothing stopping Stefan doing a bit of development. He did some script monkey work this week, and he did really well. But, you know, if I had to pick him over one of my other teams, say Dan the developer, you know, I'd pick Dan because he's got the most development experience. I'd pick Stefan if it was the testing kind of tasks. I'd pick Anna if it was more of a business task. But, you know, Agile's really starting to focus on people like Gordon, who's got skills in each area. And maybe he wouldn't be, he's a jack of all trades, maybe not a master of any, but do we want somebody who's good at development, testing, business, architecture, and being a good test analyst? It's kind of, you've got to weigh it up. And these Scrum teams are made up of various scorecards like this. So we've got to put the right people in the right positions. This slide, I'm nearly finished, so don't worry. I think one of the challenges is working out what kind of solution you have to do for a particular project. And a lot of the clients which we deal with at the moment are really focused on kind of providing the enterprise solution, providing the Ferrari, but they don't want to pay the pricing required to actually get the job done properly, or the tools that are required to get the job properly. So I think, you know, there's a core solution which you need to be able to offer, but you can use open source tools, you could use Logan if you wanted to. You should be able to pick and choose what you want as a solution. Just like if you was going and customizing an audit, you want to say, oh, I want a bit of compliance testing, or I want to have my TOMI level investigated. It's kind of this. You should be able to pick and choose and add to a particular box, and then turn it up and down on demand based on what value you get. You might run 100 testers for 2 days and find so many defects you don't know what to do with, so you might want to pull that back for a couple of weeks until you're able to deal with that backlog. I think you've got to have choice of what the solution is now. It should be more of a customer focus, and the benefits are so obvious. You know, all these customer assets which we have already internally, and we've got existing test assets, we've got business domain knowledge, we've got public-facing websites and web services, and there's nothing stopping testing as a service to come in and add some real value from that. Provide testing environments in the cloud, provide automation testing, provide kind of some accessibility standards or business process modeling, and it's on demand. There's no investment in capital, so you're not having to buy these tools up front or go into a long-term contract. You can literally go in and say, I want this for this long at this kind of quality. And that's really it as a summary. So it's application lifecycle lifecycle management support, cloud-based test environments, flexible test resourcing, cloud-based test assets, both manual and automated, and be able to start doing something with business domain knowledge so that everyone can utilize that without having to be business experts in a particular field. Testing should be a global marketplace, and hopefully it'll be coming to an app store near you. I'm going to finish on this final thought, which is from the book, a bit more promotion. But I suppose what I'm trying to say by all of this thought-provoking presentation is, the best aspects of the proven approaches right today are evolving all the time. And so is the technology underneath it and the tools that are available. So you've got to go with it. You've got to go with those new tools and new approaches and just try and utilize them and make the most of it. But don't get stuck in a rut with having to do something the same way because it worked for the last 10 times. You never know, one of these methodologies or approaches might give you so much extra value. So thanks for listening, and I'll leave on that slide. If anybody needs to know anything else or questions, just give me a shout. I'll be at the pub.